everybody, The Music Fan is back bringing smiles to the faces, knowledge to the people, and most importantly, music to the masses. And I'm back with another Are You In? And this one's going to be a little bit interesting. I did not think I was going to review this album, but here we are. So without further ado, tonight I'm going to be reviewing The Beautiful Liar. This is the third album from Ithaca, New York, pop rock and alt rock band X Ambassadors. Members including Sam Nelson Harris on lead vocals, guitar, saxophone, bass, guitar, drums, and percussion, Casey Harris on piano, keyboards, and backing vocals, and Adam Levin on drums and percussion. Not Adam Levine, Adam Levin. They've had two previous albums, which are VHS in 2015 and Orion in 2019. If you can't remember exactly who this band is, you might know them from a somewhat popular song, Renegades, from their first album. This band, to me, is kind of like the middle ground when it comes to alt rock and pop rock bands. Not bad, not great, just middle. Kind of like with me, where I think Weezer is like that middle of like pop punk, if you will, alt rock. This is like that perfect, like if you're doing a pH scale on acids and bases, this is water. They've had some decent songs, but nothing that like really gripped me. And to be honest, Orion kind of left a poor taste in my mouth. Yes, there were some songs that I enjoyed. I think Boom was a decent song, as well as Hey Child, but for the most part, other than a few songs, didn't really stick with me. Saw that they were putting out a new album, and it was like, okay, it's only 30 minutes long. I can easily digest this. To be honest though, this one super surprised me. So this album has this narrative throughout it, even though it is a little bit convoluted at times. The idea behind this album kind of falls along like an episodic adventure that feels a little bit like an episode on old ham radio back in the day, or something that would like came out in the 1960s with this like noir style idea. Even like the cover feels like very noir and dark. Even throughout this album, you get like the idea of skits and commercials. The narrative, from what I understand, is there's this little girl who is blind, and she one day runs into her shadow, and her shadow is asking if he can come out and play. And it's supposed to, from what I can gather, feel like a little bit like very dark and cynical, but also kind of heartwarming, where this shadow will always be with her, and as long as she can accept that, then they will get along. But that will be the only true person that is actually there for her at the end of the day. Almost a majority of this 16-track album either has skits or are like very short songs. So taking away the skits like Chapter 1, The Sleeping Giant, Chapter 2, Enter the Shadow, a brief word from our sponsors and authors notes, you're left with 12 songs that span about 30 minutes altogether. Some of these being skits and some of these being more fleshed out. Something else that I gathered from this album and from what I was reading up on, this band was trying to go out of their comfort zone and talk about topics that they hadn't really gone into. This is the most mature and most kind of horrifying that this band has ever gone, and they've had some songs that were very sobering, like Unsteady, but like this is them at their bleakest, and it makes for a really interesting journey. The other thing that I noticed too is that this is also their most mature sounding album, where it's not like super bombastic all the time. For example, like Beautiful Liar and My Own Monster, both really understated songs. Beautiful Liar kind of reminds me of Massive Attack's Teardrop in terms of just the sound, and I really enjoyed the melody line from Sam Nelson on here. Nothing super over the top, but just eerie enough. I also really enjoyed the modal mixing on this song, and just like has a really solid chorus. Really nice like falsetto work from Sam Nelson and some really solid harmonies. It does stay a little bit too long, but I just like the vibe throughout most of it. My Own Monster, again, also kind of understated. It does have this bounce, and I do like the vulnerability of what he's talking about. For the most part, another really solid song. But there's also a couple of like more playful songs, like Adrenaline, that kind of reminds me of Boom. Super simplistic, with all these simple parts coming together to make this kind of fun and tongue-in-cheek song. And I like the flow of consciousness lyrics from Sam Nelson. You also get Palo Santo, which is just like a weird yet engaging little dark number. I really enjoyed the chanted choruses. It just feels super dark, like Sam Nelson is playing this character, Palo Santo, who's like just gonna like mess up everybody's shit. And then on the last part of these like songs, you get some really like beautiful songs. Love is Death is this just like really beautiful like semi ballad talking about how love disappears over time, but still wanting to have that love there and just like crying out for it. Okay is like kind of simplistic with this like kind of like childish melody, but also just has this tone of sadness, which is weird when they're talking about everything's going to be okay. And even that like last part of the song has this talk from the shadow talking about how they will always be there for the little girl in this story, no matter what. And it like balances on that like uplifting and yet kind of morose at the same time, which is super interesting and makes for like multiple listens as you can figure out like what side you want to fall on. But honestly, the most beautiful song on here is Somebody Who Knows You. It is really, really touching. A song about when you're down, when you're angry, when you're feeling isolated, that there's someone out there for you, and you just have to remember that, even if that person's not there at the moment. Just like really heartbreaking, yet beautiful at the same time. It makes for, to me, the highlight on this album. And then you end up with Reincarnated, which is a really like short but sweet and upbeat song about even if you die, you will be reincarnated with the energy of the world and be in the trees and the leaves, talking to loved ones and being like, don't cry for me because I will still be here, just in a different form. Other than that, you get a couple of like interlude-ish songs, and this is where like things get a little bit weird. So for example, you get Conversations with My Friends, which is this kind of like tongue-in-cheek yet crazy number, which feels kind of punk-ish. It's this guy talking about that he has conversations with his friends, but it actually turns out to be that he's the one who's crazy because he's just talking to himself, because he's driven everybody off with his very negative outlook on life. Then you get I Can See the Light, which is just basically an interlude moving into Palo Santo. And then you get Theater of War, which kind of feels like a really weird and tongue-in-cheek commercial, which has this like old-time radio jazzy vibe. Like it's super over the top, like that's the theater of war, cha 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 cha, you know. Other than those songs, I will say there's one downside, which is bullshit. Not really an engaging song in my opinion. Feels a little bit too monotone. There's some interesting electronic ideas in the interludes, but like nothing that really stands out. But make no mistake, this is a very interesting album. I just wish that the pacing was a little bit better, because it kind of just feels a little bit all over the place, even for a album that's only like 36 minutes long. It just feels weird because the front is loaded with full-fledged songs, the back is loaded with full-fledged songs, but this middle part is where you get like all of the interludes and all of the skits and like some of the shorter songs. I think that might kind of make sense, because it's probably like if you were to do like a 30-minute show, this is probably where the commercials would come in. But like there's just a little bit of like too much zaniness at times with this CD, but I really appreciate the vulnerability that this CD shows. This is like the most mature that this band has ever been. So for me, this definitely warrants a full listen. It's short enough, and like the adventure is just super weird and interesting at the same time. Don't sleep on this album. I'm not saying that this is going to be in my top 50. I don't think it will be. I think there's just too many holes and too much weird direction at times. But I think you will be missing out if you don't listen to this album. It's like definitely worth your time, especially with how short it is. And I'm just pleasantly surprised that this band put out something like this, and I would love to see them try more experimenting and have it a little bit more fleshed out next time. But that is my time. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you love or hate this album and your reasons why. Share this with your friends. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. I'm going to be putting out a lot of videos in a short amount of time, so it'll be awesome to get your support if you haven't supported this yet. Until then, this is a Music Fan, and I'm signing off.